Welcome to a functional introduction to Biblical Hebrew. This is a cognitive framework for reading, learning, and translating. Orientation. Biblical Hebrew is not a primitive version of modern languages, nor is it an early attempt at systematic theology. It is a highly compressed cognitive system designed to communicate function, relationship, and movement rather than static objects or abstract labels. Where English tends to ask, "What is this?" Hebrew more often asks, "How does this act, relate, or move?" This difference is not static. It is structural. As a result, much of the tension that readers experience when approaching the Hebrew Bible in translation does not arise from the text itself, but from the cognitive assumptions imposed by English. Literalism, moralization, and abstraction often reflects the habits of English grammar rather than the intent of the Hebrew language. This introduces a functional approach to Hebrew designed to preserve the internal logic of language, make Hebrew easily learnable, and provide a reproducible method for translating Hebrew meaning into English without flattening it. Hebrew operates as a compressed language. A single word often carries action, direction, relational content, and embodied experience. English typically separates these into multiple words or explanatory phrases. The process used here is called cognitive decompression. This does not mean adding interpretation or symbolism. It means unfolding what is already present but implicit in the Hebrew form. An analogy may help. Hebrew is like sheet music. English is just spoken sound. Reading Hebrew fluently does not require hearing the music yet, but translating it requires understanding of how the music works, not just naming the notes. In this framework, Hebrew words are not treated as labels or objects or metaphysical entities. They are treated as descriptions of function. For example, many Hebrew roots traditionally translated as nouns behave grammatically and conceptually like verbs or processes. Meaning emerges from the context, the sequence, the orientation, and relationship to other actions. This is why the same root may appear to mean different things in different passages. It has not changed meaning. It is performing a different function. Why this is not mysticism. This approach does not rely on numerology, hidden symbolism, esoteric doctrines, or later theological systems. Instead, this method relies on the structure of the Hebrew language itself, root behavior across the texts, grammatical patterns, and consistent functional logic. Where patterns appear, they are tested against the usage in the text. Where a reading cannot be reproduced elsewhere, it is discarded. The Hebrew alphabet is not treated here as a set of symbolic icons or mystical archetypes. It is treated as a functional language system. Each letter constrains how sound is produced, shapes how roots behave, and influences how meaning unfolds. The alphabet exhibits an internal structural coherence, including directionality, degrees of embodiment, functional pairings, and transitional relationships. One of the most consistent features of Biblical Hebrew is an embodiment gradient. At one end, bodily action, physical movement, and material interaction. At the other end, orientation, intention, source, or initiation. Hebrew does not rush towards abstraction. It moves upward through action, not away from it. This is why narrative texts feel grounded and dynamic. Instructional texts feel concrete and repetitive. Moral conclusions emerge slowly, if at all. Understanding this gradient helps explain why different sections of the Hebrew Bible feel so different, without assuming different authors, agendas, or theologies. This series is also designed to make learning Hebrew easier and fun, not hard or boring. Instead of memorizing letters without context, vocabulary lists without behavior, translations without logic, readers are invited to learn what letters do, how roots behave, why meaning shifts predictably. English analogies are provided where helpful, not to replace Hebrew cognition, but to anchor it for those trained in English thinking first. This method allows expanding compressed meaning into clear English, multiple valid renderings of the same Hebrew phrase, ambiguity where the text itself is ambiguous. This method forbids importing later theological systems, treating letters as mystical entities, or allowing analogies to override textual usage, and creating meanings not grounded in Hebrew structure. Every rendering must be defensible from its root behavior, grammar, context, repetition elsewhere in the text. This series is a fantastic guide for learning the Hebrew alphabet. It is a reference for reading biblical Hebrew as a discipline for translation and decompression, as a shared framework for discussion. It is not intended to replace existing translations, but it does stand alongside them, offering a window into how the Hebrew language itself organizes meaning. The Hebrew alphabet is not merely a phonetic system, nor is it a collection of symbolic icons. It is a functional constraint system that governs how meaning is generated, shaped, and related. Letters in biblical Hebrew do not carry meaning independently in the way English words do. Instead, each letter contributes a behavioral tendency that shapes how a root functions in context. This system presents each letter according to its functional role, its degree of embodiment, its common linguistic behavior, and an English anchoring analogy, which are all common translation errors. The goal is not to memorize, but recognition. Let's talk about embodiment. When a letter is described as embodied or abstract, this does not mean symbolic or metaphysical. It refers to how closely the letter's function relates to a physical action, a sensory experience, orientation or intent, and an initiating source. Hebrew meaning moves from embodied action towards orientation and origin, not the other way around. This method uses sequence to the hippocampus, a story to your default mode network, embodiment through your motor and sensory cortex, and repetition, which aids in long-term consolidation. You are not memorizing letters. You are memorizing motion.